Exploding penises of holy prophets, a girl cut in two to settle an argument, boys boiled alive and eaten by their very own mothers. In the darkest of valleys, a zombie army springs into action. The Bible can be a dark and frightening place, so get ready to have the fear of God put into you. Number 10. Start with good old cannibalism, a rather taboo practice that is nonetheless as old as time. There are actually lots of mentions of cannibalism in the Bible, although we doubt you ever read about them in Sunday school. We also might imagine many of you haven't heard of a guy named Micah. The Old Testament describes him as living in a place called Moreshet in ancient Israel. As prophets tend to be, he was often very indignant when it came to the wicked ways of the rich and powerful. In terms of uttering stern words, Micah was a heavyweight champ. When denouncing the corrupt and greedy, he talks about cannibalism. He says of the greedy rulers, "They tear the skin from my people and the flesh from their bones. They eat my people's flesh, strip off their skin, and break their bones in pieces. They chop them up like meat for the pan, like flesh for the pot." As with many parts of the Bible, you don't have to take this literally. Micah might have just been using metaphors to say how terrible the leaders were. But did he really have to go into so much detail? Then you have this from Jeremiah 19:9. "I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and daughters, and they will eat one another's flesh because their enemies will press the siege so hard against them to destroy them." That sounds pretty literal to us, but of course it might also have been symbolic. That brings us to the boiled kids, because what good story doesn't have boiled kids in it? It's from 2 Kings 6, verses 28 to 29. It tells us that Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, laid siege to Samaria, the central part of the land of Israel. In the fighting, babies were dashed against rocks and pregnant women were ripped into pieces. As sieges go, it was a stunning victory, but it left some of the surviving locals in trouble because it lasted so long and caused a famine. Things were apparently so bad that a donkey's head was going for 80 shekels. It gets much worse. One day, the victorious king is walking through the town when a hungry woman weakly cries to him, "Help me, my lord the king." The king, not one to mince words, says, "Hey, if the Lord hasn't helped you, what do you expect me to do?" The woman then tells him just how bad things have gotten. She explains what happened to her recently, telling the king, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked up my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son so we may eat him,' but she had hidden him." It seems she felt worse about being double-crossed than eating her own child. The king doesn't seem to care much about this hypocrisy, and that's the last thing we hear of the woman. As you'll now see, the stories get even more berserk than that. This next one involves an exploding male member. Number 9. You all know the story of Judas, the man who played the betrayer of Jesus in the story Fear and Loathing in the Garden of Gethsemane. There are many different takes on what happened to him next, but we rather like the one which has his penis turning into an explosive device. The story was written by a guy named Papias of Hierapolis, who was around 60 to 130 years after Christ. He told a lot of stories, and he swore they were true. He once said, "I shall not hesitate also to put into ordered form for you, along with the interpretations, everything I learned carefully in the past from the elders, and noted down carefully, for the truth of which I vouch." Still, the story we're going to tell you is called Apocrypha, meaning stories that are not accepted as part of the canon. The story goes that right after the betrayal, Judas made a run for it, but he didn't get far because he started to bloat like a balloon. This goes against the more accepted story of Matthew, which has Judas being hanged, and when he was taken down still alive, his guts spilling out. That was balderdash according to the Acts of Papias. He wrote that Judas expanded so much he couldn't even get through the gate. The passage says not even the massiveness of his head could get through. Judas's eyes shrank under his bloating eyelids, and not even the doctors could find them. This next bit you'll need to hear in Papias' own words. His penis appeared to be more repulsive and larger than any disgraceful member, and bloody discharge and maggots poured from all over his body, which caused injury whenever he attended to his bodily needs. So Judas obviously had a horrific ending to his story, one that's too gruesome to go into further detail. Papias writes that he soon passed away from the torture, but where he fell stank for many years to come. You can understand why kids don't learn this in Sunday school, but you can't deny it would make for great drama on the stage, as would this next story. Number 8. How to solve a problem King Solomon style. This is from 1 Kings 3:16 to 28 and has the header, "A Wise Ruling." One day, King Solomon was kicking back when he was told a woman wanted to talk to him about a certain problem she had. She got to his door and he said something like, "Hey, come in, take a seat." The woman wasted no time and told the king, "Pardon me, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I had a baby while she was there with me. The third day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the two of us. Both these women, by the way, were prostitutes. That doesn't matter. What matters was that the plaintiff said the other woman accidentally laid on her own child in her sleep and suffocated it. The plaintiff said that this woman then sneaked sneaked into her room and took her living child. The woman added she put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. She said she woke up and was about to feed her son when she noticed he was dead, then became aware that he wasn't her son at all. As she was explaining this to Solomon, the other woman then suddenly appeared in the palace protesting her innocence. She screamed at the king and the plaintiff, "No, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours." In the absence of modern forensic science, King Solomon was in a bit of a fix. Using an ancient toothpick to get a tough bit of lamb he'd eaten earlier from his teeth, he said in a composed, restrained voice, this one says my son is alive and your son is dead. Well, that one says, no, your son is dead while mine is alive." He sat there in deep contemplation, the two manic women hanging on each of his breaths. The king then shouted out, "Bring me my sword." The women looked perplexed. The king saw that and made things clear by saying, "Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." He finally got that bit of lamb out of his teeth, and like Detective Columbo, he seemed to know what was going to happen next. He was right. One woman screamed at him, "Please, Lord, give her the living baby, don't kill him." The other woman said, "Nah, neither I nor you shall have him, cut him in two." Picking up a jug of wine, the king turned away from the women and said to his guards, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him, she is his mother." According to the Bible, the people of Israel heard about this story and celebrated King Solomon's endless wisdom. Okay, now back to stories without happy endings. Number 7. Everyone gets their due. There are a lot of big villains in the Bible, and one of the standout baddies is King Herod the Great. What a piece of work that guy was. He was the one that ordered the massacre of the innocents. That was when he sent some folks looking for the child Jesus when he heard that he was the son of God. These people failed in their mission. After that, Herod sent the order to kill all the boys in Bethlehem under the age of 2. That's pretty scary, although likely mythology. So Herod was an ancient psycho with a short temper. He was a persecutor of the first degree. But as is often in the case in the Bible, he got his comeuppance, and he got it in style. In Acts 12:21-22, it said he went to the town of Caesarea that he had built to have a firm chat with some folks he'd been arguing with. All they wanted was a bit of peace from the king. He got up to address the people and they screamed out, "This is the voice of a god, not of a man." This is what that part of the Bible said happened next. Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down and he was eaten by worms and died. That's a fitting end for such a tyrannical ruler, although his real death might have been somewhat more down to earth, but just as frightening. Experts say Herod might have spent his final days itching like crazy and convulsing in pain due to chronic kidney disease and a weird infection that turned his genitalia gangrenous. That disease is now what we call Fournier's gangrene. So if he was as bad as the Bible makes out, talk about divine retribution. Now for something completely out of this world, and no, not the zombies, we'll get to them later. First, superheroic killer babies. Number 6. This comes from the Apocalypse of Peter, which is more apocryphal text. In these texts, Peter talks a lot about punishments. For instance, blasphemers were hanged by the tongue. Women who dressed up and tried to attract men they weren't married to were hanged by the hair above a bubbling mire. The men who got it on with them were hanged by their feet with their heads in the mire. Men who dressed up as women, or as the texts say, take the role of women, were taken up on a cliff by angels and thrown off. After they got splattered, they were taken up once again and thrown off again. We guess until the angels were content. That would create a lot of blood and flesh, but Peter said nothing was wasted. All that gore formed a lake to which women who had abortions were sent. The aborted fetuses meanwhile tormented them by turning into superheroes. That's because they fired a flash of fire from their eyes into their mothers. The text says the beams of fire smote the women in the eyes. In this orgy of violence, Peter says he saw both men and women gnawing their tongues and having flaming fire in their mouths. At the same time, if any milk came out of the mother's breasts, it would congeal and turn into snakes, animals that would then attack the women. Peter also says, "I saw the murderers and them that were consenting to them cast into a strait place full of evil creeping things, and smitten by those beasts, and so turning themselves about in that torment, and upon them were set worms like clouds of darkness." Either Peter needed some anger management classes or a good old-fashioned hug, or none of that happened. Scholars point out that all that stuff almost became part of the New Testament, but in the 4th century, the Bishop of Athanasius chose the Book of Revelations instead. But as you'll now see, the Book of Revelations is also pretty dark. Number 5. The Book of Doom. You've probably heard the story of mankind coming to an end after 7 angels blow their trumpets. In short, blood and hail and fire rain down, and wormwood poisons a third of all rivers and water. Mountains crumble into the sea. A plague of evil locusts wreak havoc. And then 200 million horsemen come down, spitting fire and sulfur from their mouths to finish off who's left. When the 7th trumpet blows, 7 bulls are released, and they carry enough disease to make everyone around have faces filled with horrific sores. It's likely that John the Elder wrote all this doom and gloom in about 96 CE. Possibly the year of a major depression. Now for some more standard violence. Number 4. John the Headless. According to one version of the tale, John the Baptist had criticized the tyrannical King Herod because Herod had divorced his wife and taken his brother's wife as a lover. John didn't think this was moral, and he made it known. So Herod had him imprisoned. Then one night, Herod threw a party, and dancing at that party was Herod's new lover's daughter, Salome. Herod was apparently very impressed with her dancing, and after a bit too much booze, he promised she could have anything she asked for, including half of his kingdom. Salome then went to her mom and told her what Herod had said. She asked for advice as to what to ask for, to which her mother said John the Baptist's head, and on a platter. Even for Herod, this was a bit too hardcore, but he agreed. Herod might have done this because he saw what influence John had had over his people, and so worried about him starting a rebellion. This is not Apocrypha, but there are various takes on the tale. This next one is literally out of this world. Number 3. Horny angels. This story comes from the Book of Enoch, which was written 200 to 300 years before Christ came on the scene. According to this apocryphal text, there were entities called the Watchers. The Watchers were angels who gave birth to rebel angels known as Nephilim. According to Enoch, Nephilim were giants whose height was 300 cubits. That would have worked out to be about 440 feet. Enoch says that the Watchers came down to earth from heaven and made out with human women, and that's how the giants were born. There are many different stories, but one says that the angel leader named Semyaza got horny after seeing people down on earth had been having a fair few beautiful and comely daughters. In total, 200 of the lustful angels descended to earth to take advantage of the women, but they also started eating all the animals and vegetation, and when that ran out, they feasted on the humans. When God got wind of this, he was far from impressed at what was pretty much cannibalism, and one take on the tale was that this was one of the reasons God flooded the earth. At the same time, he banished the rebel angels to a kind of hell or abyss called the Tartarus. Now this next one is just twisted. Number 2. Breaking all the rules. You probably all heard of Sodom and Gomorrah, the two cities which set God into a fit of anger after he'd seen the wickedness going on in there. You name it, it happened. Murder, corruption, adultery, pride, promiscuity, greed, they had it all in excess. To fix this problem, God sent 2 angels down to sort things out. When they arrived on Earth, they ended up at some guy's house. His name was Lot. Now, things start to get X-rated. That's because when those angels were in Lot's house, an angry mob formed outside and demanded to know who the 2 strangers were. It seems they also wanted to have sex with the strangers. We have no idea what happened to Lot's moral compass right then, but to get the mob to calm down, he offered them his daughters to do with as they pleased. In Genesis 19:4-9, it says, Lot said, "Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." The crowd wasn't impressed, and instead of taking Lot up on his offer of a couple of virgins, they tried to break down the door. That's when the angels blinded them all. It gets worse. The angels told Lot that he should tell them that if he had any more family, because they were going to burn the place to the ground, and with all the blind people in it. And then the Bible says, "Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground." Trouble was, when Lot and his wife were making their escape, his wife looked behind to get one last look at the place. She was subsequently turned into a pillar of salt. As if things couldn't get any more messed up, after Lot took his 2 daughters up to a cave in the hills, the girls got blind drunk and started trying to get their dad to drink. They had a wicked plan, which was to get him so drunk he'd sleep with them. The next day, the eldest child whispered to the younger child, "I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, then you go in and lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring through our father." Lot might have been thinking, "What am I doing?" But he took the booze and he also slept with his other daughter. They both got knocked up and each of them had a boy, one named Moab and one named Ben-Ammi. Okay, so that's not exactly scary, but it's also not the kind of thing you see in school plays. Now for the zombies. Number 1. Army of the Dead. This story comes from Ezekiel 37:1-10. Guided by the Lord's good hands, the prophet Ezekiel was taken to a relatively quiet valley, and everywhere were scattered bones. When Ezekiel saw the massive pile of bones, God said to him, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel said something to the effect of, "No, you're the Lord, tell me." God shouted, "Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life." And by God, did those bones start rattling. Suddenly, Ezekiel watched them picking themselves up off the floor. Flesh and tendons did appear to be surrounding the bones, but they still weren't breathing. God then said to Ezekiel, "Say this to the bones. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breathe from the 4 winds and breathe into these slain, that they may live." One by one, they stood to their feet, a vast army of God's zombies, according to the Bible. Respectable zombies, not the riffraff you always get nowadays. Now, you need to watch, was Jesus actually resurrected?